Welcome to our program, where today we delve into a deeply divisive issue. Should the fur industry be banned? This question evokes strong opinions on ethics, economics, and environmental sustainability. Joining us to discuss this are three distinguished guests: Dr. Anya Sharma, an ethicist and animal welfare advocate who supports a ban; Mr. Julian Vance, representing a fur traders association, who opposes a ban; and Ms. Sophia Chen, a sustainable fashion consultant and policy analyst, who will offer a more nuanced perspective. We will begin with opening statements, followed by a discussion and rebuttal, and conclude with closing remarks from each speaker. Dr. Sharma, please begin.
Thank you, Chloe. The position I advocate for is unequivocal. The fur industry is inherently cruel and ethically indefensible, and it must be banned. At its core, this industry is built upon the suffering and death of millions of sentient beings, all for a product that is a luxury, not a necessity. Consider the reality of fur farms. Animals such as mink, foxes, and chinchillas are typically confined for their entire lives in small, barren wire cages. These conditions are severely restrictive, preventing natural behaviors like running, digging, or swimming, leading to significant physical and psychological distress. The methods used to kill these animals are chosen to preserve the pelt, often involving gassing, electrocution, or neck breaking, practices that can result in prolonged suffering. Similarly, animals trapped in the wild endure immense pain and fear, sometimes for days, before being killed. Leg hold traps, for instance, are notoriously brutal. We must ask ourselves, do we, as a society, believe that animals have a right to life and freedom from such torment, especially for something as non-essential as a fur coat or trim? I contend that they do. The argument that fur is a tradition does not excuse the cruelty involved, especially when we now have access to numerous high-quality, warm, and fashionable alternatives that do not involve harming animals. These faux furs are increasingly sophisticated and address any practical need for warmth or aesthetic desire for texture. Therefore, a comprehensive ban is the only morally sound path forward. It is time to align our practices with our values of compassion and respect for life.
Mr. Vance, we'll now hear your opening statement.
Thank you. While I respect Dr. Sharma's passion, I believe a ban on the fur industry would be a significant overreach, with serious negative consequences. Such a ban would not only harm livelihoods, but also ignore important cultural traditions and the considerable efforts our industry has made towards humane and sustainable practices. Firstly, let's consider the economic impact. The fur industry provides jobs for thousands of people globally, from trappers and farmers to designers, manufacturers, and retailers. In many rural and indigenous communities, fur harvesting is a vital source of income and a way of life that has been passed down through generations. A ban would devastate these local economies. Secondly, fur holds deep cultural significance for many societies. It is part of their heritage, their traditions, and their connection to the natural world. To dismiss this as irrelevant is culturally insensitive. Furthermore, the regulated fur industry, particularly in North America and Europe, adheres to stringent animal welfare standards. We have comprehensive certification programs, such as Welfare for Farmed Fur, which are based on scientific evidence and ensure high levels of animal care. These programs cover housing, nutrition, health, and humane euthanasia methods. Wild fur trapping is also regulated to ensure sustainability and uses methods designed to be as humane as possible, targeting specific species and avoiding non-target captures. My concern is that an outright ban wouldn't stop the demand for fur, but would instead drive it underground, leading to an unregulated black market where animal welfare would undoubtedly be far worse, and sustainability concerns would be ignored. We advocate for responsible practices within a legal framework, not prohibition.
Ms. Chen, please share your opening perspective. Thank you, Chloe. The question of banning the fur industry is indeed complex, and I believe the debate often suffers from a polarized black and white framing. While Dr. Sharma has raised critical ethical concerns about animal welfare that are widely shared and deeply felt, and Mr. Vance has highlighted important economic and cultural dimensions, I believe a more nuanced approach is necessary. An outright ban, while perhaps appealing from a purely ethical standpoint for some, might not be the most effective or holistic solution when all factors are considered. We must acknowledge the spectrum of practices within the fur sector. There's a significant difference between industrially farmed fur, which often involves the intensive confinement Dr. Sharma described, and other potential sources. For instance, some fur comes from wildlife population management programs, where culling is deemed necessary for ecological balance. Fur from indigenous communities engaged in traditional, sustainable trapping practices also presents a different context. The concept of, quote, ethical fur is contentious. But if it were to exist, it would require exceptionally high, transparent, and verifiable welfare standards, far exceeding what is common today. Instead of a blanket ban, we could focus on significantly stricter global regulations, robust enforcement, and complete transparency in the supply chain. Clear labeling, indicating origin and production methods, could empower consumers to make informed choices. Furthermore, we must also consider the environmental impact of alternatives. Many synthetic furs are derived from plastics and contribute to microplastic pollution, which is a growing ecological concern. A more constructive path might involve investing in innovation for both truly sustainable natural materials and genuinely eco-friendly alternatives, alongside a policy framework that phases out the worst practices while allowing for highly regulated, ethical sourcing if proven possible. Thank you all for your insightful opening statements. We will now move into our discussion phase. This is an opportunity to respond to the points raised and delve deeper into specific aspects of this debate. Please maintain a respectful dialogue. Dr. Sharma, Mr. Vance mentioned humane certifications like welfare, suggesting the industry is capable of self-regulation and ensuring animal welfare. Do you believe these certifications are sufficient to address your ethical concerns?
Frankly, Chloe, no, I do not. While certifications like welfare may represent an attempt to improve conditions, they operate within a system that is fundamentally flawed from an ethical standpoint. These certifications might codify certain minimum standards for cage size or feeding, but they do not and cannot address the core issue, the commodification of sentient beings for fashion. Animals on certified farms are still denied their natural lives, still confined, and ultimately still killed for their fur. The term humane slaughter in this context is, in my view, an oxymoron when applied to an animal killed for a non-essential luxury item. Furthermore, the enforcement and auditing of these standards can be inconsistent, and the standards themselves are often developed with significant industry influence, potentially prioritizing economic feasibility over optimal animal welfare. Even if every farm met the highest possible certification standard, the ethical question remains, is it acceptable to subject an animal to a life of captivity and a premature death for the sake of a coat? My answer is a firm no. The existence of alternatives means we have a choice not to inflict this suffering.
Mr. Vance, Ms. Chen brought up the environmental impact of faux fur, particularly concerning microplastics. How does the natural fur industry position itself in terms of overall sustainability, especially when compared to these synthetic alternatives?
That's an excellent and crucial point, Chloe. Natural fur is by its very nature a sustainable and biodegradable material. It's a product of the land, and when sourced responsibly, it aligns with ecological principles. Unlike synthetic materials, which are petroleum-based, take centuries to decompose and shed microplastics with every wash and wear, natural fur will biodegrade completely, returning to the earth without leaving harmful residues. Many fur garments are also incredibly durable, lasting for decades, even generations, if cared for properly. This longevity contrasts sharply with the quote-quote fast fashion model often associated with cheaper synthetic items that are quickly discarded. Regarding wild fur, it is a prime example of sustainable use. Trapping is highly regulated to ensure wildlife populations remain healthy and abundant. It often supports conservation efforts by providing data and funding. These animals live free in their natural habitat until harvested. Even on farms, efforts are increasingly made to utilize byproducts, ensuring minimal waste. The feed for farmed animals often includes waste from human food processing, further contributing to a circular economy. So when we talk about environmental responsibility, natural fur, managed correctly, has a strong case for being a more sustainable choice than many of its plastic-based counterparts.
Ms. Chen, you've heard Dr. Sharma's profound ethical objections and Mr. Vance's arguments for economic viability and the sustainability of natural fur. How can your proposed middle ground approach, focusing on stricter regulations and ethical sourcing, realistically address the core concerns about animal suffering that Dr. Sharma voices, while also acknowledging the economic and traditional factors Mr. Vance highlights? It's undeniably a challenging balance, Chloe, but not an impossible one. My approach hinges on radical transparency and a multifaceted strategy rather than a singular solution like an outright ban. To address Dr. Sharma's concerns, any system allowing fur must implement welfare standards that are not just marginal improvements, but genuinely transformative, verified by independent, third-party audits with full public disclosure. This means moving far beyond current industry norms for many producers. This could involve, for example, phasing out cage systems entirely for farmed fur in favor of enriched environments that allow for a wider range of natural behaviors, even if this significantly increases costs. For wild fur, it means ensuring trapping methods are as humane as technologically possible and highly selective. Regarding Mr. Vance's points, recognizing legitimate, small-scale traditional or indigenous practices that are truly sustainable and integral to a culture could be part of this, perhaps with specific labeling or certification that distinguishes them from industrial-scale production. Policy tools like differential taxation could be used. Higher taxes on products from systems with lower welfare or environmental standards, and incentives for those meeting exceptionally high criteria. DNA tracing for origin verification would also be crucial to combat illegal trade and ensure claims of ethical sourcing are valid. Ultimately, it's about creating a system where, if fur is to be part of the market, it must meet an extraordinarily high bar for ethics and sustainability, allowing consumers to make genuinely informed choices. This also drives innovation in both high-welfare natural fur production and better, more sustainable alternatives. Dr. Sharma, Mr. Vance, any brief responses to Ms. Chen's proposals for a regulated, transparent, and possibly tiered market approach?
While I appreciate Ms. Chen's thoughtful attempt to find a middle path, the concept of ethical fur from farmed animals still feels like a compromise that sanitizes an unacceptable practice. Even with enriched environments, the fundamental issue of breeding animals for the sole purpose of becoming a fashion item, and their eventual killing, remains. It normalizes the idea that animal lives are resources for our trivial desires. Transparency is good, but it doesn't make an unethical act ethical. I maintain that a full ban is the clearest and most morally consistent stance.
From the industry side, Ms. Chen's suggestions for higher standards and transparency are principles we largely support and are already working towards in many regulated sectors. The challenge often lies in global implementation and ensuring a level playing field so that responsible producers are not undercut by those operating with lower standards elsewhere. We are open to discussions about continuous improvement in welfare and sustainability, as long as they are based on science and practical realities, and do not unfairly penalize a legitimate, historic, and often small-scale industry.
Thank you. We are approaching the end of our discussion segment. It's clear this is an issue with deep convictions on all sides. We will now move to closing statements. Each of you will have a final opportunity to summarize your position. Dr. Sharma, please begin.
The core of this debate is simple. In the 21st century, with a wealth of alternatives available, there is no moral justification for inflicting suffering and death on animals for fashion. The fur industry, regardless of any attempts at regulation or claims of humane practices, is predicated on the denial of an animal's most basic right to live free from exploitation and cruelty. We have a moral imperative to evolve beyond such practices. I urge listeners to support a complete ban on the fur industry and to consciously choose cruelty-free alternatives. Let our compassion guide our consumption.
Mr. Vance, your closing statement.
A ban on the fur industry would be a disproportionate response with severe negative consequences. It would lead to significant job losses, particularly in vulnerable rural and indigenous communities, and erase centuries of cultural heritage. Furthermore, it risks creating an uncontrolled black market where animal welfare would undoubtedly deteriorate. Our regulated industry is committed to responsible, sustainable, and humane practices, continually improving through research and certification. We believe in freedom of choice for consumers and the continued, sustainable use of a natural, biodegradable resource. We advocate for dialogue and evolution, not prohibition.
And finally, Ms. Chen, your closing thoughts. This issue is undeniably complex, and an outright ban, while well-intentioned, could have unintended negative consequences, such as harming specific communities or inadvertently promoting less sustainable synthetic alternatives. I advocate for a progressive path forward that prioritizes dramatically stricter global regulations, absolute transparency in supply chains, and robust support for genuinely sustainable and high-welfare fur sources if they can demonstrably meet such stringent criteria. Simultaneously, we must champion innovation in material science for better alternatives. The emphasis should be on empowering informed consumer choice through education and clear labeling, and fostering responsible industry practices across the board. I want to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Sharma, Mr. Vance, and Ms. Chen for their articulate and passionate contributions to this important discussion. We heard compelling arguments for a complete ban based on ethical principles, strong defenses of the industry, focusing on economic and traditional values alongside sustainability efforts, and a call for a nuanced, regulatory approach. We hope this debate has provided our audience with valuable insights and encourages everyone to reflect on the arguments presented and form their own informed opinions on this challenging topic. Thank you for joining us.